Hello everyone, my name is Amy Chaloupka and I'm the Curator of Art at the Whatcom Museum. During this time of extended closure, I'd like to take you on a virtual tour of one of our current exhibitions. Conversations Between Collections runs through January 3rd, 2021, and spans 2 gallery spaces touching on different themes in each space. Today I'll discuss the landscape works located in the gallery you see here. Stay tuned for part 2 of the tour, which will take place in our People of the Sea and Cedar Gallery. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that the Whatcom Museum resides on the traditional territory of the Lummi and Nooksack people, who have lived in the Coast Salish region from time immemorial. The museum honors our relationship with all of our Coast Salish neighbors and our shared responsibilities to their homeland, where we all reside today. While we can't gather in the gallery right now, I'd like to share a closer look at what's on view and why I chose these particular works to exhibit. This exhibition is titled Conversations Between Collections because the selection of works are assembled from the Whatcom Museum's permanent collection and works borrowed from the Smithsonian American Art Museum in Washington, D.C. The Smithsonian loaned 3 American masterworks from their collection for this exhibition, which we're very excited to have the opportunity to share with our audiences. One of these special loans is a painting by Hudson River School artist Jasper Francis Cropsey, titled The Coast of Genoa, located here at the far right. It is presented alongside landscapes created by prominent West Coast and Northwest artists. I've situated these works with one another to spark dialogue about what might feel familiar or foreign in a landscape. Each work in the gallery denotes a strong sense of place. By sharing contextual information about the artists and the scenes they've depicted, I invite visitors to reflect on how our experiences with natural surroundings define ideas of personal identity and how we relate to one another. This feels especially important these days as we're limited to the places we can go and the people we can connect with in person. Artists have long been deeply impacted by connections to place that they make visible through creative interpretations of the landscape. This is certainly the case in the works of Hudson River School painters like Cropsey. The Hudson River School was an artistic movement of the mid-19th century named after a specific place, the Hudson River Valley, and defined an American style of painting. These early American artists visualized a broader national identity through majestic depictions of vast wilderness and expressed this longing for nature at a time when the Industrial Revolution was in full swing. Cropsey, a second-generation Hudson River School painter, devoted much of his practice to creating idealized compositions of sweeping natural scenes. Here, he offers a window into his travels to Italy in the late 1840s. The turbulent coastal scene framed by a looming mountain range calls to mind a windy day in Bellingham Bay, backdropped by the snow-capped peak of Mount Baker. However, a closer look at Cropsey's coastline reveals classical architecture and historical figures indicating a completely different time and place that feels very far removed from the Pacific Northwest. Although the painting appears realistic, many elements of the scene were imagined or exaggerated by Cropsey to heighten the emotional effect. Across the gallery from Cropsey's painting is a work by Richard Gilkey, which soundly reflects a Pacific Northwest feel. Gilkey was born in Bellingham and raised in Skagit Valley. After fighting in World War II at the age of 17 and being severely injured both physically and psychologically, Gilkey immersed himself in the life of an artist. Like Cropsey, Gilkey made the pilgrimage to Europe to study the works of European masters. He returned to Washington 4 months later, recharged and inspired by the works of Rembrandt, Van Gogh, and Francisco Goya. Though his extensive travels exposed him to many styles of painting and broader art movements, Gilkey found his inspiration in the misty gray landscapes of the Skagit Valley. He often painted outdoors in remote locations where he would stake his easel to protect against the wind. He sought to capture the essence of shifting light and rain shower as they fell across the rolling hills and farmlands. Gilkey applied paint densely to create the texture of his grasses. Primarily using palette knives to achieve this thick impasto, his technique of scraping paint directly across the canvas gave a rugged surface to scenes that by contrast are depicted with a softness of atmosphere, diffused light, and muted color. For Gilkey, these landscapes and the act of painting them provided a long sought-after sense of calm and peace. Victoria Adams is a painter who works from her studio on Vashon Island and cites early American landscape painters like Cropsey as a source of inspiration. This woodblock print from 1988 is quite unlike the serene atmospheric landscapes Adams paints today. Here she presents a scene of high drama and chaotic movement that echo what we see in the roiling waves in the foreground of Cropsey's Genoa scene. Light appears to bounce and reflect off the turbulent downward spray of a waterfall. This effect is created by the carving of deep textural grooves into the woodblock and defined by negative space in the piece. The extremely high horizon line in the composition gives the feeling that the falls loom above us, causing tension and an awareness of the forces of nature. Adams is purposeful in the way that she constructs the scene, mimicking a sense of anxiety and commanding power. She states that, in her work, she strives to provide an interface between how a painting is experienced and how nature is experienced. The last work I'll touch on today is one that perhaps least resembles a landscape. It's a collage work by the artist Paul Horyuchi. Horyuchi was born in Oishi Village, Japan, where he studied calligraphy, sumi-e, and watercolor as a child. At 14, he immigrated to the United States and worked the railroads in Rock Springs, Wyoming. Like Gilkey, Horyuchi's life was impacted by the outbreak of World War II. Discrimination against Japanese Americans during the war resulted in the artist losing his job, his home, and much of his early artworks. After the war, Horyuchi moved his family to Seattle, where he started over and eventually found financial stability, and his art practice matured. In the mid-50s, Horyuchi began experimenting with collage in his work, which became his signature style. His unique process involved soaking pieces of rice and mulberry paper in pigments or black sumi ink, then tearing, pasting, and composing the pieces of paper onto the canvas. This piece shows large color blocks in earthy hues and rough surface textures, with loose and abstracted forms suggesting a horizon line and familiar shapes found in nature. The piece evokes the rawness of the Northwest landscape. It says more about the feel of an environment than the look of it. The artist's compositions have been described as both dynamic and quiet, disciplined and spontaneous. Horyuchi has said, "I believe painting must be both a distillation and an invention. People constantly tell me my paintings have a very peaceful quality. To me, peace and serenity are needed to balance the sensationalism that surrounds us." Largely absent of any specific narratives or even inhabitants, these works open up possibilities for interpretation and questioning. One can envision themselves within their frames, recall personal associations with similar settings, and create new meanings and connections. Thank you for joining me today, and please stay tuned for the second half of our tour of Conversations Between Collections.